The dawn air over the Russian plain is already hot. It's July 12th, 1943, near a small town called Prokhorovka. On the German side of the line, hundreds of tanks idle on a low rise. Their exhaust hangs in the sunrise like a dirty curtain. Mechanics tighten track links. Tank commanders wipe the dust off periscope glass with oily rags. Gunners go through their rituals for the 1000th time. On the Soviet side, in shallow, freshly dug trenches, infantry squeeze their rifles and listen. They can't see the German assembly area, but they can hear it. A deep animal growl, rising and falling, as if the earth itself is breathing. The order passes down in hushed shouts. "Tanky adut! The tanks are coming!" Somewhere among the ranks of the 5th Guards Tank Army, a young T-34 driver sits in his seat, hands shaking on the controls. He can't see much, just a slice of ground through a narrow slit. Above him, his tank commander stands half out of the hatch, binoculars raised, scanning. The plan is simple on paper. The Germans will attack with their best: Tigers, Panthers, and veteran crews from the elite SS Panzer divisions. They want to smash through, roll up the Soviet front, and restore the old magic of blitzkrieg. The Soviets will do something nobody expected from them in 1941. They will stand, absorb, and then counterattack with an army of steel. Within hours, this patch of ground will become one of the most chaotic tank battlefields in history. Crews will fire at silhouettes half seen through dust. Tanks will ram tanks. Assault guns will burn in place, their crews cooked alive. And in the end, something will break, not just here, but in the whole German war effort in the East. This is the story of the Battle of Kursk, the day Hitler's Panzers died in the minefields. 2 years earlier, the German army had a different energy. Summer 1941, Operation Barbarossa. 3 huge army groups plunge into the Soviet Union. Panzers roll across fields of wheat, columns of prisoners fill the roads. Entire Soviet armies are encircled and destroyed. Towns that no Westerner has ever heard of become graveyards for tens of thousands overnight. In those first months, the Germans believe they are witnessing the collapse of a rotten system. From Berlin, maps make it look easy. From inside a Panzer III turret, it smells like fuel, sweat, and victory. Tank crews drive all day, sleep in the open, then drive again. Sometimes they outrun their own infantry. Sometimes they have to slow down to let the carts and foot soldiers catch up. The Red Army seems clumsy, uncoordinated, poorly led. German officers trained on exercises with wooden tanks in the 1930s now finally get to use their theories on real battlefields. It works, at first, but the Soviet Union does not fall. It staggers, reorganizes, and fights on. The Germans reach the outskirts of Moscow and are stopped by cold mud and human bodies thrown into the line with a kind of grim, infinite determination. Winter 1941-42 nearly breaks them. They survive that winter, but something has cracked. The war that was supposed to last months is going to last years. The next summer they turn south. Stalingrad, the Volga, the oil of the Caucasus, again. The Panzers surge forward. Again, they push deep. Again, they overreach. Stalingrad becomes a trap. The 6th Army is encircled and destroyed. The Luftwaffe fails to resupply them. German soldiers surrender by the tens of thousands, shivering and starving in the snow. In Berlin, people still talk about victory. On the Eastern Front, officers start to talk about holding on. Spring 1943. The Eastern Front is a scar. If you look at it from above, the line makes a bulge near the city of Kursk, a protrusion of Soviet-held territory that juts westward into German lines like a thumb. To the north, German forces face Soviet defenses near Orel. To the south, near Belgorod and Kharkov, another German formation stares east toward heavily fortified positions. Between them, the Kursk salient sits like a target on a board. Hitler is furious about Stalingrad. He wants to hit back. to reassert control, to show that German arms can still win decisive battles. His generals propose an operation, Citadel. The idea is textbook. Attack the bulge from north and south with strong Panzer forces, pinch it off, encircle the Soviet armies inside, destroy them, shorten the front, stabilize the situation before the Western Allies can open another major front. On paper, it's elegant. On the ground, it's a nightmare waiting to happen. Because this time, the Red Army knows what's coming. In 1941, the Soviets were surprised. In 1942, they were outplayed at operational level. In 1943, they were reading German plans. Soviet intelligence, from spies abroad, radio intercepts, partisan reports, captured documents, paints a clear picture. The Germans are preparing something big at Kursk. They are massing their best units, new tanks, new assault guns, elite SS formations. The Stavka, Soviet High Command, debates what to do. Some generals argue for attacking first, strike while the Germans are still assembling. Others, including Marshal Zhukov, argue for a different strategy. Let the Germans come. Bleed them white on defenses prepared in depth. Then counterattack. It's a radical confidence. Up to this point, the Red Army has often been the side throwing themselves against German defenses. Now they will dig. Layer upon layer of trenches, minefields, anti-tank ditches, gun nests, and fallback positions appear across the salient. Villages are evacuated. Railway lines hum with traffic. The Soviet state bends its entire economy toward one goal: turn Kursk into a place where German armor goes to die. Let's look at what that actually means on the ground. If you stood on a small hill on the Soviet side of the salient in June 1943 and looked west, you wouldn't see much. Grass, scattered copses of trees. Here and there, the glint of wire. But then a staff officer might hand you a map. Suddenly, the plain you thought was empty reveals 6, 7, 8 defensive belts, one behind the other. The first belt is full of forward trenches, foxholes, and camouflaged positions for anti-tank guns. Behind it sits another line with more trenches, dugouts, and artillery. Behind that, more lines. Some positions are designed to be lost, others are designed to be death traps. Engineers, sweating and filthy, lay mines across any route where a tank might conceivably travel. Anti-tank mines, anti-personnel mines, mines connected with tripwires. By the time they're done, the front around Kursk is one of the most heavily mined areas in history. One Soviet sapper later said, "We were sowing iron instead of wheat." At the same time, Soviet factories are turning out tanks at a rate that would have seemed insane in 1941. T-34s roll off assembly lines in endless rows. They aren't perfect. They're not as heavily armed as a Tiger. They don't have fancy optics, but they are simple, robust, and numerous. Crews can be trained quickly, fuel is available, spare parts are interchangeable. While Germany struggles to produce a few hundred new Panthers and Tigers, the Soviet Union produces thousands of T-34s. Quantity is becoming a quality all its own. On the German side, preparations move forward with their own logic. The units chosen for Operation Citadel are some of the best on the Eastern Front. In the south, around Belgorod and Kharkov, the Tigers SS Panzer Corps and other formations gather. Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, Das Reich, Totenkopf. These aren't just names on paper, they are units filled with veteran officers and NCOs who have survived years of brutal fighting. Their tanks are decorated with victory rings on the barrels and kill markings on the hulls. They receive new machines. The Panther, sleek, sloped armor, high-velocity 75-meter gun designed to defeat the T-34 on its own terms. More Tigers, heavy boxy monsters with thick armor and a devastating 88-meter gun. Stu-G assault guns, self-propelled guns, armored personnel carriers, artillery pieces. Everything that remains of Germany's offensive strength in the east is poured into the jaws of this operation. There is a catch. Several catches, actually. First, the attack is delayed. Originally planned for spring 1943, it is pushed back. First, because commanders want more tanks, more Panthers issued, more artillery, more time to prepare. Every delay gives the Soviets more time to dig, mine, organize, and reinforce their defenses. Second, the new German tanks are not fully tested. The Panther, in particular, suffers from teething problems. Engines overheat. Transmission and final drive assemblies break under strain. In exercises, some break down before reaching the starting line. Third, German air power is no longer unchallenged. The Soviet Air Force, the VVS, is rising from the ruin of 1941-42 use aircraft, better training, more aggressive doctrine. The Luftwaffe will still be dangerous over Kursk, but it won't own the sky. Finally, fuel is tighter. Every hour a tank runs its engine on exercise is an hour less it can drive in battle. Officers at the front worry. In Hitler's headquarters, the plan still looks bold. On the ground, it looks like a gamble growing worse every week. Early July 1943, D-Day for Operation Citadel comes at last. On the night before the attack, along hundreds of kilometers of front, German infantry and tank crews sit in their vehicles or trenches, checking gear, smoking, trying to sleep. In one Tiger crew, the gunner runs his hands over his beloved 88, whispering to it as if to a sweetheart. Tomorrow we'll show them. In another vehicle, a Panther driver silently prays that his engine doesn't die on him in front of the whole company. Officers pore over maps lit by dim lamps. The attack sectors are narrow. Spearhead divisions are supposed to punch through in certain corridors and then fan out. Everything depends on concentrating force. On the Soviet side, things are quieter, but only on the surface. Command posts are busy. Telephone operators connect last-minute calls. Political officers give short speeches. Remember, comrades, behind you is your motherland. There is nowhere to retreat. In the trenches, soldiers sleep in shifts. Some take out small icons or amulets. Others sharpen bayonets out of habit more than need. Artillerymen sit on ammo crates, smoking, waiting for the order to fire. Sappers double-check minefields by touch in the dark. Somewhere, a radio operator intercepts German messages. There's no doubt anymore. They're coming at dawn. The attack begins with sound. First, artillery. German guns open up in a roar that seems to stretch across the entire horizon. High explosive shells shriek overhead and crash down into Soviet first-line trenches. Trees splinter. Earth geysers up. Men flatten themselves at the bottom of foxholes and hope they dug deep enough. Counter-battery fire answers. Soviet guns bark back. The sky fills with crisscrossing trajectories of metal and fire you could never see with the naked eye. In the chaos, a whistle blows. Engines revving under German tank columns begin to move. In the south, Tigers and Panthers roll forward, their tracks grinding through dust and grass. Behind them, Panzer IVs and IIIs, armored half-tracks full of Panzer grenadiers. They move slowly at first, keeping formation. Field commanders know the danger of bunching up. They've seen what happens when artillery finds a cluster. But they also know that the minefields ahead are dense. They rely on sappers and engineers to clear lanes under fire. On a ridge, a Soviet artillery observer watches through binoculars. At first, he sees nothing, then dust, a faint smudge, then glints of metal as the sun catches turret roofs. He calls in a fire mission. Soon, the area in front of the advancing Panzers becomes a zone of bursts and fountains of earth. Shells fall among them. Some tanks take hits and stop. Others push on. They've done this before. They've faced artillery. What they haven't faced is what lies invisible under their tracks. Anti-tank mines sit just beneath the soil. They are dull gray discs, each one capable of blowing a track off a tank or ripping open the belly of a lighter vehicle. In some belts, there are hundreds per kilometer. German engineers work rapidly, probing with bayonets, clearing lanes. They're brave under fire, crawling in front of their own tanks to defuse or blow lanes through. But there are too many mines and too little time. Panzer commanders, under pressure to maintain momentum, sometimes push forward before the lanes are fully secure. That's when the first crunches come. A Tiger's front right corner leaps upward as a wheel hits a mine. The explosion blasts dirt and steel. The tank shudders to a halt, track thrown. It's not dead, but it's not moving either. Crew inside are shaken, maybe wounded, ears ringing. They scramble to repair, or if the fire spreads, to bail out. A lighter Panzer III hits another mine. This one is less lucky. The blast punches through the thin bottom plating. A sheet of flame fills the interior. The driver and radio operator die instantly. The turret crew try to escape through the top hatches, but they're slow. Soviet machine guns rake the tank, cutting down anyone who emerges. Within minutes, the beautifully ordered German spearheads are slowed, bunched, and forced into mine-cleared corridors. Those corridors are exactly where the Soviet gunners want them. Well-sighted 45mm and 76.2mm anti-tank guns, dug in and camouflaged, open fire as soon as the Panzers enter range. Shells smack into frontal plates. Most bounce off the heaviest tanks. But side hits, track hits, and hits on lighter tanks take their toll. In some sectors, assault guns, low-silhouette German Stugs, do well, hulled down, trading shots across fields. In others, they find themselves in no man's land, stuck trying to maneuver in a landscape designed to trap them. For the first time, German tank crews feel something new. Not invincibility, resistance. That refuses to break. Days pass. Citadel grinds on. This isn't a single day's clash. It's a series of brutal grinding attacks, counterattacks, local breakthroughs, and frantic plugging of gaps. In the north, German forces under Model push toward the city of Kursk from Orel. They make gains, penetrate several belts, but progress slows. In the south, the Teilbanen SS Panzer Corps under Hauser makes more dramatic progress. They chew through the first Soviet lines, inflicting heavy losses. Units like Leibstandarte and Das Reich still have edge. They still know how to coordinate armor, infantry, artillery, and air in combined arms attacks. They fight village by village, field by field. SS Grenadiers storm trenches. Soviet units sometimes crumble. But something is different from 1941. When a Soviet unit breaks, there is another behind it. When a gap opens, reserves move in. When a hill is lost, counter-battery fire pounds it, and sometimes Soviet infantry take it back by hand. German commanders look at their maps and see advances measured not in hundreds of kilometers, but in tens. It's progress. But not enough. Not fast enough. Every kilometer comes at a price. Tanks are lost permanently or damaged. Crews are killed or evacuated with burns and concussions. The Luftwaffe supports them with dive bombers and fighters, but it can't dominate like before. Soviet Yak and LGG fighters are there contesting. Soviet anti-aircraft guns ring every important point. The German spearheads are driving into a funnel. At the end of that funnel, near Prokhorovka, a storm is waiting. July 12th. Prokhorovka. This is the moment most people think of when they say Kursk, the greatest tank battle in history, even though the entire operation was much larger and more complex. Here, on this relatively small sector, huge armored forces collide in a way that feels almost medieval in its brutality. In the days leading up to the 12th, German units in the south, including Leibstandarte and Totenkopf, have pushed to within reach of Prokhorovka station. Stalin and Zhukov are watching closely. They have a blunt instrument to use, the 5th Guards Tank Army under Rotmistrov. Hundreds of T-34s, T-70s, and supporting infantry and guns. The plan is desperate and simple. Hit the Germans with a massive counterattack before they can straighten their lines and consolidate. Use speed, shock, and numbers to throw them back. Rotmistrov's crews are briefed. They know they'll be attacking through anti-tank fire. They know they'll be charging toward Tigers and Panthers that can kill them at long range. Many of them have only a few weeks of training. Some have never fired their guns in anger, but they go. Shortly after dawn, the Soviet tanks crest ridges and pour down toward German positions. From the German side, tank commanders are stunned. The field in front of them is suddenly dotted with T-34s appearing from behind every fold in the ground, dust behind them, guns blazing on the move. Many of them fire from too far away, shells bouncing off German frontal armor. Panzer IVs, Panthers, and Tigers respond from prepared hull-down positions. They have the advantage. In theory, higher velocity guns, better optics, more experience. They begin to knock out Soviet tanks at range. T-34s burn. But the Soviets keep coming. They close the distance. At close range, the T-34's 76mm gun can penetrate the side armor of German tanks. Gunners fire over open sights. Some crews ram German tanks, jamming turrets, causing chaos. One Soviet tank with its gun knocked out allegedly drives straight into a German tank destroyer, climbing up onto its hull before both catch fire. On both sides, commanders lose control. Radio nets clog with shouts. Dust and smoke reduce visibility to almost nothing. Some German guns start hitting their own vehicles in the confusion. Soviet units become intermingled. What was supposed to be careful, coordinated armored warfare becomes a mass of individual duels at point-blank range. Inside a Tiger, the loader's muscles burn. Shell in, breech closed, fire, case out, shell in, again, targets everywhere. Some are T-34s, visible for a second, then gone in smoke. Others are mere shapes. Every shot counts. Inside a T-34, the crew has less room, more noise, more heat. Shells clank in ammunition racks. The driver can't see anything but what the commander yells over the noise. Left! Tank! Fire! The gun barks. If they're lucky, the target explodes. If they're not, the return shot hits them and there's no time to think. Men bail out of burning vehicles only to be cut down by machine gun fire or crushed by other tanks. By midday, the fields are a landscape of blackened, smoking hulks, German and Soviet. No neat victory banners here, just exhaustion and loss. So who wins Prokhorovka? If you go by raw tank losses, the Soviets lose more. They throw their tank army into the battle and get it mauled. But war is not a score sheet of tanks. It's about goals. The German goal was to break through, to keep advancing, to encircle. They don't. The Soviet goal was to stop them, at almost any cost. They do. After Prokhorovka, German forces in the south still hold positions. They are not thrown back hundreds of kilometers, but their offensive power is blunted. Many of their best tanks are gone or in workshops. Their infantry is exhausted. Their ammunition stocks are depleted. Their strategic surprise is gone. And something else happens far from Kursk that changes the meaning of all this blood. Allied troops land on Sicily. A new front opens. Hitler, faced with a hemorrhaging situation in the Mediterranean, decides to call off Operation Citadel. No more big push at Kursk. No more trying to smash the salient. The Panzer formations that survived are told to go on the defensive. For the first time in the East, the German army, at a high level, is done with major offensive operations. From now on, it will spend most of its time retreating. After Citadel is canceled, the Soviets don't just breathe a sigh of relief, they attack. Operation Kutuzov in the north, Operation Rumyantsev in the south. They push toward Oral, Kharkov, and beyond. Now it's the German defensive belts under pressure. German engineers and soldiers know how to build strong positions. They counterattack when they can. They inflict heavy casualties. But the trend is clear. They are no longer choosing the time and place. They are reacting. German Panzer divisions that once roamed freely across the steppe are now fire brigades, rushed from crisis to crisis, trying to plug holes in a line that is slowly, inexorably being pushed west. The loss at Kursk is more than a lost operation. It's the loss of the strategic initiative. From this point on, German soldiers on the Eastern Front know, deep down, that they will never again be the ones driving hundreds of kilometers toward Moscow. They will be the ones moving backward, sowing mines instead of avoiding them, digging trenches instead of bypassing them. They have seen what happens when they run into a Red Army that is dug in, supplied, and ready. They know that the next time they face a mass of Soviet armor, it may not be as a spearhead, but as prey. Years later, men who fought at Kursk on both sides try to explain what it was like. Some talk about the noise, a constant roar, engines, guns, explosions, screams that never really stopped for days. Others talk about the dust, fine, choking clouds that got into eyes, ears, food, weapons. Some talk about the smells, burning rubber, hot oil, exploding ammunition, charred flesh, burned grain in fields set alight. Some veterans remember small, strange details. A horse stumbling through a field of burned-out tanks, lost. A field kitchen set up in a crater. A letter from home found in a dead man's pocket describing a quiet village life that no longer existed. Historians argue about numbers. How many tanks were really there? How many were destroyed versus damaged? Was Prokhorovka the largest tank battle, or was that just a myth from wartime propaganda? But in a way, the exact numbers don't matter to the people who were there. For them, it was more than enough. More enough than any human mind can neatly quantify. When you zoom out, the Battle of Kursk, and especially its southern fighting around Prokhorovka, sits at a crossroads. Before it, even after Stalingrad, there was still a faint, desperate hope on the German side that a really successful offensive might restore the situation. Kursk kills that hope. After it, the Eastern Front is a road heading one direction, west. For the Soviets, Kursk is proof of concept, proof that with enough preparation, enough reserves, and enough willingness to take losses, they can absorb a German attack and then hit back harder. It's also a proving ground for new doctrines. The use of deep defensive belts, massed artillery, and then deep operational level armored exploitation. What they learn there will be used again and again as they push toward the Dnieper, the Vistula, and finally Berlin. For the tank as a symbol, Kursk is a strange moment. You might think it glorifies the tank. All these stories of duels and charges, but in many ways it shows the limits of iron. Tanks without fuel, without air support, without good planning and realistic goals will die in minefields and artillery zones. Tanks thrown into battle without infantry support or reconnaissance will run into ambushes and burn. Kursk is not a story about who had the better tank. It's a story about who used their tanks in a way their industry and strategy could support. Germany fielded brilliant machines, but not enough of them, with too many mechanical problems in a gamble that assumed the enemy would break. The enemy didn't. The Soviet Union fielded cruder machines in huge numbers on ground of their own choosing, backed by deep reserves and a willingness to treat each tank as expendable. In that clash of philosophies, the minefields won. If you visit the fields around Kursk and Prokhorovka today, you can walk over the same ridges. The ground is greener now. No burned hulks, no craters, just fields and small villages, memorials and museums. Farmers have plowed these fields for decades, turning up bits of history. A rusted track link, a chunk of armor plate, a shell casing. Sometimes a whole tank is found buried in the mud, preserved by the soil. Wrecks pulled from riverbeds still have tools hanging where the crew left them, personal items tucked into corners. They are time capsules from the day the Panzers went forward and didn't come back. Tourists come. Guides point. This is where the SS units attacked. This is where Rotmistrov's tanks charged. It's hard standing there on a quiet day to imagine what it sounded like, what it smelled like. But if you close your eyes, you can try. You hear the low rumble of engines massed on the line. You hear whistles. You hear someone shout, "Vorwärts," on one side and "Berjod" on the other. You feel in your imagination the vibration of 100 tanks crossing a field at once. And you understand why, for the men who survived it, Kursk was not just another battle. It was the moment when they realized the war had turned from a sprint into a grind, and that grind was something Germany could no longer win. The day Hitler's Panzers died in the minefields wasn't one calendar day. It was a phase, a turning, a slow-motion collapse of an idea. The idea that superior tactics and bravery alone could overcome a bigger, better supplied opponent. The steel burned out in those fields. The myth burned with it. What was left afterward was mud, smoke, wrecks, and a Red Army now marching west, through gaps in the line where Tigers and Panthers had once stood, but would never stand again.